These videos are about learning to play blues harmonica without using any kind of music notation. In part 1 we looked at all the notes you need. In part 2 we began a voyage looking at all these notes individually and the contribution they each make to the music, at least from my perspective. In part 3 we continue this process. We are currently up to hole 3, draw, and this is a reed that can play the third, and by bending we can extend that down to the second also. In the diagram, the blue area refers to all the notes that you can get off the third hole draw, and you'll see that there are 4 of them. The arrow on the right hand side, that is the major third. The arrow next to that is the minor third or blue third. The arrow next to that is the second, and the arrow next to that is the lowered second. So here are the 4 notes. This particular region contains the magical blue third. Now I've lumped the blue third in with the minor third. Some people feel that the blue third should be pitched somewhere between the minor third and the major third. To me it doesn't matter, because when you play with a backing band you're going to pitch it appropriately to what sounds right. And not only that, the blues itself mimics the human voice, and the human voice can vary its pitch continuously, and we can do that on harmonica with the blue notes. And I think this is part of the deal about extracting maximum value from the emotion that is latent there. We can take this blue third and vary the pitch to just give the maximum effect. Perhaps a bit like this. The end of that last section might have reminded you of the discussion we had in part 2 when we were talking about the tonic as a resolver of tension. We can understand now why that end of phrase seems to inevitably want to finish with the strength of the tonic. We're so close to it. We bend down from the third, down to the lowered third, to the second, and perhaps even to the lowered second, and that of course is so close to the tonic. Another use of the third is to link the strength of the tonic with the strength of the fifth by a series of steps. But the third in this context is played in a special way, especially if the phrase is played slowly. It's a short upward swing which smoothly links the step below it and the step after it. So we'll discuss this in more detail in the next section, where we go on to hole 4, the fifth. The blue region here represents the fifth between the 2 reference tonics. So the right hand arrow is the fifth itself, and the left hand arrow is the lowered fifth. So here's the fifth, and here's the lowered fifth. Let me play a little tune. Of course that's When the Saints, but the interesting thing is that the opening sequence there and a sequence that pops up right through that tune, is the same as the phrase that we were discussing in the last section. It's no wonder that that tune is possibly the best known of all blues jazz tunes. That phrase, we have the strength of the tonic connected to the strength of the fifth by a series of logical steps that pass through the blue third. Very strong. But the interesting thing is that that particular sequence of notes can take a number of guises. Let me play you something else now. This perhaps should be done with a backing band. I'm going to do it unaccompanied, but imagine that you're coming out of a song and going into the break. So I'm going to do the backing first of all, and then we're going to go into a harmonica break. So it might go something like this. Now, that little, what seems like a run before the fifth, is actually the same sequence of notes as in When the Saints. It's just in a different guise. If I slow it down, it's like this. So the timing is different, and I've doubled up on the tonic, but essentially it's the same sequence of notes. And this sequence of notes pops up in all sorts of breaks by keyboard players and sax players and guitarists. And there's just so many different guises that this progression can go under. Let's look at another one.
Oh, yeah.
I estimate I play that phrase about 5 times in that particular solo. And you might ask, well, why is it such a popular phrase? Well, as I've said before, it connects the strength of the tonic to the strength of the fifth by a series of logical steps. And it's the fifth that tends to be the focus of many solos. So many solos have the fifth as a kind of a secondary home base. We've talked about how the tonic is a home base, the strongest of all, and the fifth as the second strongest note tends also to be a kind of a secondary home, so solos are often focused around it. And it's nice to have a connection between the tonic and the fifth as a little bit of colour before you start the solo itself. Now, you don't have to start the solo with that run up. You can go straight into the fifth. Harmonica players can play a little draw run, which is quite effective. Just go in like that. But once you do get there, well, what do you do? Well, solo in that area might go something like this.